So typically, Draw Sense, Dark, and Fire, and Wind, and Spell and Trap, and Low Level, all those Draw Sense cards tend to be pretty garbage when it comes to Duel Links because there's not really too much that you can do with them, and they have a somewhat annoying requirement where you have to lower your life points in order to just draw a specific card. However, in this deck, I've managed to find a very small, pretty good use for them. So we're playing here a Quintet Gravekeepers 30-card Grass is Greener deck using the skill Draw Sense Light. What that does is whenever your life points are below, I believe, 1800 or 1500, it should be 1800. Whenever your 1800 life points are lower, and it's your turn, you can activate this ability. So in your draw phase, rather than drawing your card, you can add a random light monster to your hand. Thankfully, one of the new cards that was just added is Palladium Oracle Mahad, who is a light monster that can be summoned as soon as you draw him. As soon as you draw this card, you can just go right ahead, special summon him straight from your hand, which is great because he has 2500 attack, or 2500 attack body on him, which is pretty solid. He also has a nice effect in that when he's destroyed, if you manage to have Dark Magician in your deck, or I believe hand or graveyard, you're able to summon it. So running Dark Magician works really well for that. Also, you don't need to use only Draw Sense Lights in order to pull this off. You can just use any other draw to get this. But also, he's a spellcaster, which works perfect with this Quintet Magician deck here that we're running. So this deck here, like I said, is a Quintet Magician deck using mainly Gravekeepers in the deck. I do have a Dragon Keeper Magic in order to get the magicalized fusion into my hand. Other than that, everything else, and Card Trooper, everything else is a spellcaster. On top of that, I've only got very limited quantities of these spellcasters. The only cards that I've repeated are one of the Gravekeepers that allows me to destroy monster or cards on the field, and another one that allows me to special summon Gravekeepers from my graveyard, and also Paladin Oracle Mahad, because he's actually a pretty good card. As you can see here, my opponent's gonna do a whole bunch of shit in the first turn, summon a big monster with 2600 attack. I'm gonna go ahead and just use Grass is Greener, and you're gonna see me essentially do an OTK with just literally 2 cards where I just summon Quintet Magician, destroy all my opponent's monsters and cards, and attack them directly for 45,000 damage, which is just ridiculous. So like I mentioned earlier, this deck is going to be using Draw Sense Light. It can be used each time your life points are decreased by 1500, not 1800 like I previously stated. And during your draw phase, rather than conducting your normal draw, you can add a random light attribute monster in your deck to your hand by drawing it. Use this Paladin Oracle Mahad, you can automatically summon him using his special summon effect. You can use this with the deck in order to get Mahad when you're in tough spots, but I would rather recommend doing something like Spell Specialist, which was what I was originally going to do with this since it is a Grass is Greener deck. However, I was using Mokuba from the Dark Side of Dimensions to level him up, and that's sort of how this all became. Right, so I've got Palladium Oracle Mahad here, who's got a real great effect, as I just mentioned, where if you draw him, you can special summon him straight from your hand. He also has a nice other effect, where if he battles a dark monster, he actually doubles his attack. So that's if he's attacking, or if he's attacked by a dark monster, which is really great. And finally, you can also special summon a Dark Magician from your hand, deck, or graveyard if he's destroyed by battle or card effect. You can add Dark Magician to this deck. I don't see it being too horrible. Of course, this deck isn't extremely bricky, but adding Dark Magician might do that. But of course, if you're using Draw Sense Light versus Spell Specialist, you might want to add in a Dark Magician instead. So got 2 copies of that. Following that, I've got Alistair the Invoker here. I've got 1 copy of this. This card is pretty interesting. It's mainly used because it's a spellcaster, and I also have its fusion cards in my extra deck because I also have Invocation in my deck as well. But we'll get to that later on. I have here 1 copy of Gravekeeper's Chief. He's not half bad because when he's attributed, he can special summon a Gravekeeper from the graveyard, so you can literally tribute a Gravekeeper just to special summon it again, which is not half bad. And if you, for example, combo it with some of the other cards that special summon Gravekeepers, you get some nice bonuses from that. I've got one copy of Gravekeeper's Spy here in order to get more monsters out from my deck, which is pretty nice. And I've got here Keeper of Dragon Magic, which is a really awesome card. It allows you to discard one card from your hand, and then you can add from your deck either one Polymerization or one card that's a fusion normal spell card. So any card essentially that has fusion in its name and also happens to be a normal spell card you can add to your hand, which is great. It also has another effect where you can special summon one of the fusion materials of a fusion card you have listed in your extra deck in face down defense position, which is okay, but it won't really work in this deck. You can get the Invoker out if you'd like, but it's not all that useful. It does help you get a whoops, moved one of them by accident. It does help you get another spellcaster out on the field. So we've got 2 copies of that. I've got 1 copy of Card Trooper. There's only 1 copy of it in the game, but Card Trooper is pretty good. It does allow you to draw 1 card, but it more importantly allows you to mill 3 cards from the top of your deck, which is great because it allows you again to mill a bunch of your spellcasters. And I've got 1 copy of Gravekeeper's Priestess. She doesn't really do anything special. I just think she looks kind of cool, so I've got 1 copy of her. You'll see why I have 1 copy of that later on. I do have 2 copies of Gravekeeper's Descendants here, because he does have a pretty decent effect in where he can tribute 1 face-up Gravekeeper's monsters to target 1 card your opponent controls and destroy it. So that works out pretty well. I have 1 copy of Gravekeeper's Guard. I might argue putting in 2 copies of Guard versus Descendant, just because Guard's effect is really good. It can just when he's flipped, he can send 1 card back to the opponent's hand, 1 monster, which is really good because a lot of cards nowadays are getting hard to destroy with effects and whatnot. And Gravekeeper's Guard combos perfectly with Gravekeeper's Headman here, who, whenever this card is summoned, so normal or special summon, you can target 1 level 4 or lower Gravekeeper monster in your graveyard and special summon in face-up attack or face down defense position, which is great because you can summon another Gravekeeper's Guard if you use it and use its effect again, which is pretty cool. So I've got 2 copies of that. I've got 1 copy of Gravekeeper's Nobleman, which whenever it's destroyed, either by just by battle. Never mind. Whenever this card is destroyed by battle, you can just go ahead and summon 1 Gravekeeper from your deck in face down defense position. So it just allows me to search out more Gravekeepers from the deck, which allows me to have more spellcasters in the field and or graveyard. I've got just 1 copy of Gravekeeper's Ambusher. I just have him similar to Gravekeeper's Priestess. He's just 1 copy just because he's a spellcaster and he has pretty decent attack. Same here with Gravekeeper's Heretic. Here I only got 1 copy of him because he's got pretty decent attack and he's a single copy of a spellcaster. Invocation I have 2 copies of, I have just 1 copy in this version of the deck. I have 1 copy of Invocation because in the deck I also have the Gravekeeper Supernaturalist, which requires 2 not spellcasters, but 2 Gravekeepers monsters, and I can use them. I can use this card to fuse them in order to summon that card. In case I get in a tough spot and I don't have enough to summon Quintet Magician just yet, I can use this for that. I've got 2 copies of Necro Valley Throne, which allows me to either add a Gravekeeper from my deck or immediately normal summon 1 from my hand. 1 copy of Galaxy Cyclone in case it goes to the graveyard by Grass is Greener. I can use its effect, and also I can do some back row disruption with it. I've got 2 copies of Grass is Greener, which if you have more cards in your deck than your opponent, at the time you activate this card, you can discard it, the top cards from your deck to the graveyard until you have the same number of cards in your deck as your opponent. 1 copy of Enemy Controller just to protect myself. I've got 1 copy of Dark Magic Veil, which is pretty good because all of my spellcasters minus Mahad are all dark monsters, so I can all special summon them by paying 1,000 life points from the hand or the graveyard. I can special summon them, and then it also kind of gives me a little more it edges me a little bit more closer towards being able to use Draw Sense Light. Here's the one of the main key cards here is Magicalized Fusion. Allows me to fusion summon one spellcaster fusion monster from my extra deck by banishing fusion materials from either the field or the graveyard, essentially a miracle fusion for spellcasters, which is great. I've got 3 copies of that. I got 1 copy of Wall of Disruption just to keep me safe, and 1 copy of Rite of Spirit. Don't really use this card too much. You can take that out for a different copy of another card, but all it does is just allows you to special summon a Gravekeeper from your graveyard. Moving on to the extra deck, I have here 2 copies of Quintet Magician. Quintet Magician is the key card for this deck. Whenever he's fusion summoned, using 5 spellcaster monsters with different names, so you need 5 spellcaster monsters to summon him in general, but if they happen to all have different names, you can wipe your opponent's field completely, non-targeted. You can destroy all cards your opponent controls. On top of that, this card cannot be tributed, so you can't destroy it with Lava Golem, and nor can it be used as a fusion material, so you can't destroy it, or you can't fuse it to get rid of it with Super Poly or something like that. And on top of all of that, it cannot be destroyed by card effects, so you can't destroy it by, you know, any effects that destroy cards, like Treacherous Trap or anything like that. You can still target it, so you can still banish it, or you can still remove it from the field to the hand, but after he blows up the field and attacks directly, there's not really too much that your opponent can do. Other than that, I have 1 copy of each of the invoked fusions here, just so whenever I have Alistair in the graveyard, I can go ahead and try and use him to either summon Kaliga here, or I can try and go for Kokaktis or Magilanika, whatever the hell this shit is. So I can summon this as well, just in case I need to. And also, whenever Invocation is in the graveyard, I can use its graveyard effect to return Alistair to the deck, or rather to reserve Invocation to the deck and add a copy of the Invoker to my hand, which is not half bad. But then finally, I also just have 1 copy of Gravekeeper's Supernaturalist, who does gain attack times attack and defense times the levels of the monsters you use to fusion summon it, which is just 2 Gravekeepers. And then on top of that, the only relevant effect is that during the main phase you can activate his effect, where in the end phase you can add Necro Valley you can add Necro Valley or Gravekeeper's monster or card to your hand, which is, whoops, remove them from the deck again, which is not half bad. But yeah, that's the deck. Let me know what you think about it. I think that Quintet Magician is hella fucking strong. I'm trying to work on versions of it that are not, 30 cards, see how easily I can summon this card, but I feel like this card is crazy broken, and I don't see any way that anyone can change my mind, especially in Duel Links, how this card can be stopped on the regular. But in any case, stay fresh.